All right. Welcome, everybody, and thanks for joining us on LinkedIn and YouTube. My name is Jonathan Baker. I'm the Senior Director of Education at TIA. I'm joined by Chris Colquist from Callaway. Off the top, we always do a little bit of housekeeping. We've got to run through our antitrust. So discussion, comments, and presentations during TIA functions must not, one, refer to any past, present, or future rates, prices, or anything related thereto. Two, include any reference to marketing strategies. Three, include any discussion of voice outs of any person, product, or firm. Or four, inhibit any members' employees from discussing employment with other member companies. Things you hear during the meeting that are confidential and private to TIA should not be shared publicly without its prior consent or used against or in competition with TIA. So, Chris, I know we're talking about M&A today. Want to give you a chance to introduce yourself to the audience, and then we'll just dive right into it.
Sure. Hello, everybody. Chris Colquist, managing partner of Callaway. We're focused in logistics. You know, our tilt is really from an operating perspective. We go to market as an industry growth partner. I started in logistics for C.H. Robinson over 20 years ago and ran their business development, corporate development team, i.e. acquisitions. Just really fortunate to be around a great company and great people. Learned a lot. We had a lot of good opportunities. So from there, I took a role as president of FreightQuote. Did that for 6 years and now have been doing Callaway for 5. So had a lot of good M&A experience and met with so many business owners over the years and been through a lot of processes and closed a lot of deals. So there's something to be said for experience as you get older, and we'd love to share some of that and kind of what we're seeing today. So obviously appreciate the time and my operating partners as well. And looking forward to the conference in a few weeks and seeing you, Jonathan, and the rest of the team down there. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks. So I'd be remiss if I didn't say thank you to DAT. They're our sponsor, and we have a quick commercial for them before we jump into our main topic today.
Freight isn't static. It's dynamic. It evolves. Today, freight brokers have more on the line, and they need to act faster than ever before. Rates move, capacity shifts, and customer expectations never slow down. That's why, for decades, brokers have trusted DAT. Now, we're evolving to serve you better. We've brought together innovative companies and brilliant minds obsessed with solving broker problems. And we've accelerated how quickly ideas become products. All to create a one-stop shop for trusted capacity, automation, and real-time insights. That means the largest, most secure carrier network in freight. It means full visibility to give your customers peace of mind. It means simplified execution to keep pace with a fast-moving industry, and real-time market insights to anticipate changes before they happen. DAT Freight and Analytics. We take the uncertainty out of freight.
Awesome. So, Chris, let's dig right into it. I've got 3 or 4 things I know you and I wanted to talk about today. So let me hit you with this first question, and then we'll have the audience jump in at the end. Just in case anybody's new to this, you can put your questions directly into LinkedIn and YouTube, and we'll get to those towards the end of the live stream. So, Chris, what do you see in the current and expected 2026 M&A market for logistics activity?
Yeah, and we're in a good spot because we obviously see all the banker deals and broker deals, and then we spend a lot of time on our proprietary deal flow. But it's one of the things that we monitor, and I would tell you we're seeing a lot more kind of inbound. And I think there's numerous reasons for that. We're all well aware of the freight recession we've been in, and M&A has been down for all those reasons. So we expect, and we're seeing a very active 2026, which is why having dialogues like this, and we're really engaging with a lot of business owners as they're thinking about that. You've seen some deals finally start to happening on, ITS, kind of e-shipping, the WEX deal that just kind of got announced. So I think that's a good thing for the market. And I think other business owners, and you think about our TIA audience, it's, kind of a sign that there's more activity out there on both the buy side and the sell side. So I would expect a lot of activity. One thing that we're struggling with is where we kind of spend our time. And so we're all very busy and there's a lot out there. So trying to be a little bit more picky and really the people that we've talked to over the years and built some relationships with, more focused on that. But yeah, there's definitely a lot more activity in 2026.
Are you seeing any differences between like freight brokerages and, asset-based businesses? Is there any differences there?
I mean, both are active in the space, right? So I think you're seeing both. I mean, I would tell you private equity has been such a big piece of the market over the last 5 or 10 years. Typically, they like the asset light models a little bit more for their financial backing and model and structure. So they're probably not as active on the asset side. So, and there's still people that want to do that. But I would tell you we're seeing probably more on the asset light just because of that. And there was such an influx of asset light post COVID. And I think some people are just, it's been a rough few years, and they're thinking differently about how do I partner, who do I partner with, how do I get ready to that next stage. I think what you're hearing in the marketplace, everybody talks about AI, which is real, but if you think about the audience that we're chatting with today, is maybe you don't have to figure that out on your own. Can you partner with with somebody? But to your first question, we're obviously seeing that across. I mean, we monitor and help and are part of the technology side as well. And so, we're seeing activity there kind of on all sides, whether it's freight tech, asset light, or even, the asset-based trucking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are you seeing anything with the valuation and the structures in the current market, specifically around like what owners should expect to see?
Yeah, I'm glad you bring that up. I would say the structure, and we'll just kind of define what that means. I would tell you there's definitely a trend towards more structure, and just really what that means. Could be a combination of an earnout, could be a combination of rollover, where you're taking some of your equity and you're rolling it into the future structure of whether it's a combined entity. You've got seller notes. So you're seeing a lot more trend there for various reasons. The buyers are trying to de-risk, and a lot of the business that we see, there's not a lot of long-term contracts and some other things. So I think the buyers are trying to be smarter about structure. So I think from an owner perspective, just kind of be aware of that it's more common to have some structure. And that's why having good advisors around you or people who have done that before is important. I mean, we see a lot in the marketplace, and there's a lot of difference between a $20 million cash deal and a $30 million structure deal, that, really understanding what that means. And you do hear some of the negative stories of, hey, I signed up for an earnout and it didn't work well. And, there's multiple reasons for that. But, for the audience today, I think, in the old days, it was let's build a business, let's sell it to someone, we get write-offs in the sunset, they're going to give us cash up front. That's the exception. It does happen, but I would say it's probably the exception to the rule.
Right. How do you think about and define the pros and cons from various buyer categories? So strategics, private equity, industry growth partners, things like that.
Yeah. So if you think about, the private equity, again, just the amount of capital going to that space and that asset class in the last 5, 10, 15 years has been almost astronomical. So the pro there is a lot of capital, and they want to do deals, right? So that's a really good thing as you think about the private. But they have a model where they will say, we're not operators, right? They are good, really smart people who invest wisely, and really understand, hopefully what they're getting into. But, the pros and cons of that is they hire good CEOs and presidents and people around that to kind of manage the business. Sometimes that can be good. Sometimes that can be bad if things get a little hairy or the cycles that we're in. And so I think, some of the private equity folks that have more history and in kind of investment in transportation and logistics or supply chain are probably better partners than somebody coming in cold. And then you get the strategics, right? And obviously the benefit of a strategic, in a lot of cases, they have the ability to have synergies and in theory pay more, or in theory be able to help you kind of grow faster. Typically the downside is they've got a bigger piece of business, and there's going to be an integration opportunity / challenge. And so really understanding your strategic partner and how that looks. Again, everyone hears about M&A, whatever ratio you say 60% of the deals fail or whatever it is. My theme is going to be understand your partner, and you've got pros and cons on the strategics. You got pros and cons over in the private equity. We go to market as an industry growth partner, where obviously we all grow up in logistics, understand the space well. We've got good growth plans. We've got good playbooks. We understand the cycles that we're in and have been in. So as we sit on the board and we sit as investors, There's just probably a different, and then obviously we've got capital as well. So we kind of sit in the middle. We don't have the same synergies that the really large companies have that can come in and do some of that. But we think we differentiate ourselves from some of the private equity. So again, there's no right answer. And what I would tell everyone is think about all three of those categories and get back to a lot of what we talk about with business owners is, and it's a hard question, define your goal or what your goals are. And it's actually really hard. Like if you sit down and, some of these business owners have been successful for so long, they've had to pivot, they've had to do all these things, to really say, what's your goal for a transaction? Obviously, the one that's common is, I want a purchase price, whether you call it optimize, the most amount, whatever that may be. But then you get into partnerships and what's good for my employees or my customers or my legacy, or there's a lot of other things to consider that you can weight different. But I do think that's one theme that we believe in is get to know your partner and kind of what they stand for and what their kind of growth plan is. And hopefully they're bringing more than just capital. We obviously have helped some people in some other ways on some advisory stuff too. And I said, capital is great and really important. I believe the best partners bring more than capital, myself. And I think that's where you can really have better long-term success.
Yeah, for those owners out there who've been getting inbound from all three of those categories, right? What's the first question you think they should ask each type of buyer to kind of separate, the serious people from just noise that they're getting in their inbox?
Good. And again, I talk to business owners all the time. Like, Chris, I get how many emails a day? And the industry, including us, is pretty good at that. So it's amazing and it's overwhelming. Take it with a grain of salt. Just because you're getting 100 inbounds or whatever it is doesn't mean they're qualified. How I would think about that, and I've helped people think through this, is on the private equity side, the first question you should be asking is, do you have investments in logistics already? What's your premise or your theme, and why are you interested? Because typically you'll have a junior person soliciting you, and he's got his big, or her has got their big universe. So understanding why are you actually interested in my company? In some cases, it's just a broad blast email. So, what specifically do you like about my company, and how do you think about that? And then probably thirdly, what's your typical game plan on how you work with business owners in that? So kind of on the strategics, there's probably different things, and I came from a little bit of this world. There's things on size and there's things on profitability metrics. They have size thresholds, and they'll have, hey, it's got to be at least this profitable. Some are like, we don't do distressed. And those are all really good things to know. And for good buyers, they want to know that as quickly, going both ways. So as you think about these inbounds, think about, and I can do it pretty quick when I've helped people do that. It doesn't take long to qualify to get them over the hump to say, okay, this is someone I may want to talk with at a conference or have a call with. But I think about on kind of the strategics, and then high level, how does it fit within your company? Because some of the strategics, you could be a small piece of a bigger, you could be medium. There's more questions on how do I fit into that? Because again, you think about, you could have a corp dev person calling you up that's just trying to get some deals done versus really being integrated in that strategy. For us, kind of in the middle, we try to address all those things. Like, we've done over 20 deals, we've looked at thousands, we've done a lot and learned on that. But even for us, not everything's a good fit. We have criteria, and I talk with someone, I'm like, you know what, you're better off with this strategic, you're better off with this private equity. I would consider these. So even myself and my operating partners, we do spend time chatting with business owners and can find out pretty quickly. And the reality is, you get to know people over time, and we're pretty upfront saying, this isn't going to fit, or it's not a high priority. Like, there's one we're working on right now that we've had to be pretty honest with them, saying, we just have too many other priorities. The timing's bad for us. But I think those qualification pieces, as you see so much noise out there, is really important. And then backing into how serious of a buyer and partner are they, versus just going through an exercise of, solicitation and marketing.
Yeah. Before we kind of pivot to sale preparation, I just wanted to remind everyone, I've already seen a couple of questions come in through the chat on LinkedIn and YouTube. If you have questions for Chris, we'd love to answer your questions on this live stream. So throw them in there for us. we'll get them towards the end. So Chris, for sale preparation, what are some of the top considerations, for preparing your logistics company for a potential merger or sale?
Well, a couple things to think about. I'm a big fan of some type of advisor, and I won't get into kind of details, but typically your average investment banker advisor is hey, once you're ready to sell, let's start. I think there's a lot of work to be done in advance of that. And so there's kind of a gap in the market today on that. That's not how the investment banks and or advisors or brokers are set up. That's just not their structure. So that's nothing against them. And they may do a little bit of coaching, but we probably get more involved to get people in a better spot. The core ones are, you're always going to get your financials in order, right? Get GAAP financials, get things cleaned up. In a lot of these cases, and it doesn't make sense to have a really expensive CFO or some of these other things as your $50 million broker, 25, 100, whatever your number is. But take some time, because the last thing you want to do is get into a process and have that blow up on you. And that happens a lot. Us on the buyer side, we see that a lot. So we'll have a discussion and their financials are a mess. And we're like, hey, not only for us, but for anyone else who's going to come in and chat with you, kind of get that in order. So that would be one. Two, think about the management team and think about succession planning or whatever version that looks like. When people come in, good buyers are going to be like, a lot of the value is sitting in the management team. Is how concentrated is that? Are they looking to retire? Do you have some young guns that are really going to be kind of more valuable? Take an honest assessment. We got a couple situations right now. We've been chatting for a couple of years, and they've got a really good plan of, hey, I want to get our president to be the CEO, or I want to get that GM to be the president, but he or she needs a couple of years to kind of get there. And again, that becomes real P&L management, different decision making. So when that buyer comes in, they're like, okay, I can kind of rely, and it becomes a really good opportunity for that, that up and coming promoted. So kind of the management team, stuff on your customer base, and you have concentration, that's more blocking and kind of tackling. Where are you in technology? And that's probably a big one for all of us. We're spending a ton of time in that, as you would imagine, and impacts across our businesses and what we're looking at. Get that story together, right? And where you are. And I just think it's good to have a little practice and see, if someone's going to invest in your company, I do not believe the best thing is, here's the light switch, I'm ready to go. I really believe some preparation. Have discussions with people like me or private equity or others, right? If I have it all the time. Chris, I don't want to sell for 2 years. I'm like, perfect. Here's some things I would consider. And tell you what, if you just want to send me some stuff, I'll just give you some quick things that I would put high on the list. I mean, really quick, where it doesn't take me long, to things that a buyer is going to have some red flags on, or it's going to make your thing more successful. So there's a lot of those things, but it's hard because you're grinding every day. We all know what the market's been like. You don't really have time to do that, but some of those things that you can put in place to better position your business a year or two down the road, whatever it may be, those are worth investments. And then think about it. Those can be investments. Maybe they're one time, we all know how that can kind of work, but I would do that versus, okay, I'm just going to run really hard. Here's the light switch. Find someone to help me sell my business. It can happen, but I think preparation and then educating the buyers, the business owners along the way on what they should expect. I think it's a really good thing for them.
Yeah, you listed a couple of things in there. Is there one single most common thing you see that kind of suppresses evaluation that somebody should look at?
Concentration in general, and that could be customer concentration, that could be management concentration. Again, and we're talking about relatively small businesses. If you think about, and obviously we're from a TIA audience perspective, you got a lot who are 10 million, 25 million, 50 million. I've been saying this for a while. I think you can get a founder and owner who can be really successful and build a company to 50 to 100 million, and that's the hump. And then they're like, okay, now what do I do? Do I really go all in on a bigger sales force? Do I really go all in on technology? How do I? And we see a lot of that. And so you got to think about the concentration there. It could be customers. It could be, okay, if you want to exit the business, who's here running this thing after? We have that a lot. And I think a lot of this audience would admit that. So think about concentration, not only from specific customers, but kind of management. Or maybe you got one or two salespeople that are driving 80% of the new business, right? Buyers are going to look at that and be like, okay, they like working for you. They have no intention on leaving, but when you do a transaction, that's a catalyst. And that's just a risk thing that's real for a new buyer coming in. And the more you can address that, and there's different ways to do that, but I think that would probably be the number one I'd put on the radar.
Good. For advisory resources, like what do you recommend as far as additional resources, partners, things like that? I know you've got investment banking, accounting, legal, a bunch of different things. Can you kind of run through that with us?
Yeah, my biggest thing is get some advisors or some mentors or people who have really been through a process, right? I mean, typically, if you're a small broker, you've got your personal accountant, you got your personal lawyer that probably don't have any, haven't done a lot of deals. Maybe some have. They're good people to have some ideas with, but who do you really know in the space to be like, help me think through this? And in a lot of cases, and people are like, well, why do you do that? I said, I want small businesses to have it could be investment banker, could be business broker. Typically there's a size element. Typically the investment bankers are doing at least a little bit bigger deals because they have thresholds on what they need to make, as we all know. So you have a little bit of this business broker versus kind of investment banker, but doing it on your own is going to be very hard. And unless you have a buyer that you got to know, that you got to trust, and you've educated yourself a little bit, having an advisor is probably a good way. Now, there's different ways to structure that. You could do a lighter versus heavier, but then you get into the finance and accounting side. I mean, those are big things. I'd probably lean more towards on the finance and accounting, and you can bring in a fractional. We've done this on a couple of our advisory board deals where we have investments. Is we brought in fractional CFO or fractional kind of controller. We've done that pre and post, right? So help us get ready, and then that person's done deals, right? And you don't have to pay for a full time, and you can bring some expertise. So again, my message is there's different advisors out there. There's different ways to kind of learn and get a feel for the market. Utilize them as much as possible. Obviously, the tough part is some of them are more on retainer, some are not. You'll just have to kind of figure out what your commitment. But think about that. If I'm a buyer and the seller has someone helping them in one way, shape, or form, and they've got a retainer and they're committed to selling, right? So at least I know, because we talk to a lot of people that may or may not want to sell, and at some point I'm like, hey, we gotta spend our time on ones that are more serious. When you get there, we think it's a great company, a great fit, but for now, I just don't think you're a seller. So I think there are some of those things, and some of them we've done proprietary with no advisors. That takes some time and some trust. The problem you have on the buyer side is the seller thinks we're trying to not give them a good deal, even though if you looked at the market, you'd be like, that is a market deal or a good deal. So yeah, it's kind of weird as a buyer. You're kind of like, yeah, get some good advisors so you feel comfortable that you're picking the right partner, and you feel comfortable with someone like us that we're trying to set us up both for success and not take advantage of the situation, which again, we're trying to get something. We're more on the growth side than probably distress, and we look at opportunities that can help people, specifically in today's world. We are seeing a lot of opportunity situations that really help people that have been really good company and bones, but their profitability is lower.
Yeah, I mean, how early in the process should an owner start putting this team together, and are there any costs to waiting too long in the process?
I kind of like the year. I mean, again, year or two, but if you think about a year out, and we're part of numerous scenarios right now that we're doing that. And most of that we're on the buy side, right? So it's like, okay, we're chatting with them, like, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to market in December, January, get the numbers closed. We got some things we got to kind of fix. But I do think if you think about it in kind of that year prep, you could do it in 6 months if you had, there's a little bit more blocking and tackling finance stuff, but I think a year is a good general benchmark.
All right. I think we covered our main topics, and I know we've had some questions coming in. If you have questions, throw them in the chat for Chris. The first one I've got here is, how can a smaller brokerage really understand whether a potential partner is the right fit given the pros and cons you've mentioned so far?
mean, the reality is you got to spend a little time with them. And the good news in today's world, you can do that via Teams, and you can do that calls. And, what we spend a lot of time is let's do that in a condensed way that we really get to know each other. And I think that's it. And have a bunch of questions. I mean, again, this is where on the sell side, here's my qualifying questions. Here's what I think about as a good partner. Go to them with, here's my goals. My goal is to get as much purchase price as possible, but I want a good partner that's going to help us grow. I want some of these other things. See how they react to that. Kind of go on the aggressive and like, here's what I want. And then challenge them and be like, is this good? Because a lot of the guys will be like, yeah, that's great. And make sure you're talking, again, you're going to talk with people just want to get a deal done. And then you're going to talk with true principles. Like in our world, again, one of our differentiators is you're talking to true principles. Sure, we want to get deals done, but we're obviously calling the shots too. Or in other cases, I talked to an owner, like I talked to him, he seemed great, everything. I said, well, he's selling, right? That's what he's supposed to do. If you talk to those type of structures, make sure you get up to the senior people as well. If you think they're a good fit and you're liking the story, like, hey, I want to jump on with the CEO or managing partner or whatever their structure is, man, I would suggest that.
Awesome. Next question here. How do owners think about and define their goals for an M&A transaction? I know you hit on that a little bit.
Yeah. Again, obviously the primary one, which is common for everyone, is kind of purchase price. And there could be on the extreme side, and I've heard this, I want the highest purchase price I can get. I don't care about anything else. That isn't always the case. Or there's people that's really what they want. That could be a different process. That could be different buyers. That could be a lot of different things. Then you keep coming down the spectrum to the one is like, you know what? I want an even balance. Because I've got someone who's worked for me for 20 years and I think they have a lot of opportunity with a good partner, and I got employees I care about, and I got customers that I got to look them in the eye on who I sold to. Maybe there's more of a balance into something in between, right? And I just think about when you're defining goals, there's obviously a value purchase price, which is the primary and biggest one. How much do you value some of these qualitative pieces of a partnership? We talk about it as a partnership because that's what it needs to be. And afterwards, as we're all holding hands, and if you're doing a rollover or whatever it may be, let's make sure we can get along. We can have a beer together. Some of those things go a long ways. And so just try to think about other goals. And to be honest, if I hear someone, and I've heard this, are you an interested seller? They're like, yeah, if you write me a big enough check. I'm like, well, that's not our criteria. Because if the only thing you care about, and if you think we're going to pay way over market so you can ride off in the sunset with no risk, not very many people will do that, but maybe you can find someone like that. Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks like we're getting pretty close to time here. We got a couple minutes left, so we always like to wrap up with this question, Chris. So do you have any final thoughts you want to leave the audience with in terms of this topic before we wrap up?
No, again, we talked about preparation, kind of resources. We talked about the different partners. There's not a right answer. Obviously, start thinking about that before you get there, and it's hard with all the business things. So, just reach out to people like us. There's other people out there, maybe not exactly like us, but if you get that private equity, that seems pretty good. Chat with them. You get a good strategic. I'm obviously going to be at TIA. Would love to meet anyone. Cup of coffee, 10 minutes, give you a few things on what the company's like, but I can help them kind of think through that. And again, think about it as a partnership and less as a transaction. At the end of the day, it is a transaction. But think about it as a partnership. And the reality is on the sell side, for all the business owners in the audience, the hard part, you only kind of do this once. Maybe you have some rollover for the second bite at the apple, but you're not used to doing that. You haven't done this hundreds of times, like a lot of us have for these processes, or thousands. But partner up with people you know and you trust, and you can go have a dinner with. And because afterwards, things are not always what they seem, and they get hard. And that's where you got to have culture matters, relationships matter.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Chris. This has genuinely been very, very useful, I think, for everybody that's been able to watch. I think anybody in logistics who's thinking about this kind of thing would get a lot out of this conversation we just had. And for the audience, if you guys want to learn more about Callaway or Chris, just in general, I know he's going to be at conference with us in a couple of weeks out in Phoenix, starting on the 15th. I know you're golfing and other stuff. They might be able to find you on Thursday or Friday.
I will be there golfing.
Yeah, for sure. Just like everybody else. You can reach out to us at education@tianet.com or .org, and we can, get you in contact with Chris that way. That's probably the easiest way to do it. And if you found some, value in today's conversation, make sure you share with people on the network. Get this out to everybody that you can. It's an important thing to keep in the back of your mind, especially if you're an owner. So thank you to everybody who joined us live. We've got another one of these next Tuesday, so make sure you look into that. And if it's something that piques your interest, come back and join us. But again, thanks, Chris. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, everybody. And thank you, TIA.